what they're trying to show here is just pervasive control over her life by Sean Combs, and frankly, pervasive control by him over all aspects of his business and personal life. And the prosecution is using her expansively, not only as a witness about the abuse she suffered, allegedly, but about the nature of his alleged enterprise and the people under his command and all sorts of other things. The video is really shock and awe, and I understand the prosecution wanting to get that video out there at the outset of this trial. That shows genuine physical abuse. There's really no way around that.
So much plays a role here, Jesse. It goes in every different direction. First of all, the people who are taking the poll are almost self-selected, right? They're obviously interested and have been following the Diddy case for a long time. They might actually know, your Law and Crime viewers might know a lot more about this case than the jurors do, at least at this point. And so it's hard to say whether it's going to, spill over to how the jury feels. On the other hand, the jury is supposed to be objective. It's supposed to reflect the community, and hopefully the jury is listening very, very intently to all of the testimony, both the cross and also the direct from the prosecution. I do think that Cassie has come across very credible. I also do think that there is a little bit of an uphill battle with respect to these text messages, because they're going to try to say, look, you're saying these things now, but your state of mind at the time was that you were a willing participant.
I guess to the point, and I think what I heard Elizabeth say was what she was conferring, or I think it was Miss Anna who was conferring with other attorneys, but essentially they need a woman to cross-examine Miss Ventura. And the importance of that is because, optically speaking, when you have a man who is cross-examining a woman, especially a pregnant woman who is very delicate in nature because of her pregnancy condition, it just looks bad to have a male cross-examine her. So it's not surprising that the defense would have made the decision to have this particular attorney cross-examine her. And I think for optics speaking, that was the right thing for them to do. If they had a male cross-examining Miss Ventura, it would have just looked very aggressive, as if they're pummeling down or combative with a woman who is pregnant and fragile and maybe in the eyes of the jury is a victim. So they're very careful about that.
I would highly doubt that this is going to end today. Most likely it will continue tomorrow, possibly into Monday. I'm smiling because I think it's funny in a way, because even though this is P. Diddy and he's a famous guy and this is, the trial of the century at the moment, these scheduling things happen in all cases. Judges get very frustrated. Witnesses get frustrated routinely when things don't go their way, when schedules are longer than expected. The judge also wants to keep the schedule tight for the jury's purpose. I assume that the tightness, though, is because Cassie is pregnant. They don't want to overwhelm her. They don't want a medical situation. They want to make sure that she's okay. But you are correct. Both sides have an opportunity and must have an opportunity, especially Diddy's team, to confront his accuser.
We only have the reports from the scene, which have been very helpful in kind of following this trial. Multiple people who were in that courtroom reporting as it goes. And it sounds like she's doing a pretty good job testifying. The reports are that she's well-spoken, soft-spoken, that she didn't look at Combs directly when she came into the court. So she's a little bit low-key, which I think is the right look for this. And the prosecution is using her expansively, not only as a witness about the abuse she suffered, allegedly, but about the nature of his alleged enterprise and the people under his command and all sorts of other things. So she's covering an awful lot of ground. It's hard to know exactly how that's hitting the jurors.
One of the quotes from her was, when you really care about somebody and you're in love with them, you don't want to disappoint them. And she was talking about, participating in these freak-offs. And so she's wiping away tears as she says this, according to the reports coming out of the courtroom and according to the transcripts. So she's describing, there's a dynamic here between her and Combs. There's an age difference. There's a power difference. Obviously, he's one of the most powerful people in the entertainment industry. She says she's in love with him. She gets roped into these freak-offs. We saw the video. The video plays for the hotel video with the beating plays for the jury. That's got to be pretty powerful stuff for a jury to see that video and then listening to Cassie talk about this.
Yeah, the video is really shock and awe, and I understand the prosecution wanting to get that video out there at the outset of this trial. That shows genuine physical abuse. There's really no way around that. The rest of the story is more complicated. They're in a long-term relationship. She says she loves him. It sounds like maybe he loves her. There's some behavior that seems like it might be consensual, but Anjanette, it is 2025, so we understand now that things like power are important in a relationship, and that there can be abuse in a relationship even if there is love, even if there is some consent. You can still find that there is abuse. This is at its core a basic domestic abuse case, and that's what the jury has to parse here.
Is this domestic violence?
Yeah.
Even though maybe some of this was consensual at times, obviously there's domestic violence here, but is it? And that's the federal that he is charged with. She says, I just felt pretty horrible about myself. I felt disgusting. I felt humiliated. She said his eyes would go black. The version of him I was in love with was no longer there. But when does it cross the line into coercion? And I guess they're going to talk about going across state lines, taking her across state lines. They would both find these workers together on Craigslist and things like that. So when does it turn into?
Well, I think it turns into when you're bringing in across state lines and paying them for their services. That is, or if you're bringing her to another place for her to have acts with other people, that in theory is. But that's a really good point. There's clearly domestic abuse here, but it has to go up another level to be, and then it's got to go up another level to be racketeering. That's where the government's case becomes more complicated and more difficult.
I mean, these are all hallmarks of domestic violence, and maybe that is part of what the government is going to argue, that yes, there was domestic violence quite clearly, but this is part of the coercive portion of the.
Right. It's not domestic violence. He had a bad night and he beat her in a hotel. Right. Nobody should be judged perhaps by their worst night. But this is a pattern of activity. This is fundamentally control of another human being and control over all aspects of her life, her career, her dress, her makeup, who she could talk to and when, what she could do, where she would go, who she had sex with, what kind of sex she had. This is what they're trying to show here is just pervasive control over her life by Sean Combs, and frankly, pervasive control by him over all aspects of his business and personal life.
She said, when I chose to leave, I grabbed what I could and I got out, and Sean followed me into the hallway before the elevators and grabbed me up, threw me on the ground, kicked me, tried to drag me back to the room. He took my stuff. They're basically saying, I mean, in that video, when you watch the whole thing, and we've censored part of it, he's treating her like his property, dragging her back to the room. I mean, it's a pretty shocking thing.
To me, the video alone shows domestic violence. The video alone does not show trafficking. It does not show racketeering. The video alone is him beating his longtime girlfriend, which is horrible, which I assume the jury will react to, but it doesn't prove every element of every count of these claims. Well, I didn't think it was unusual. I thought it was a perfectly reasonable strategy move. You know these cases, you want to open strong. You want to come out of the gate if you're the prosecution with some really strong evidence, and you also want to close strong. We always talk about primacy and recency. We beat that. these conversations, but that's what you want to do. There's truth to it. So they wanted to come out strong. And not only is she the best evidence of abuse, but she also, again, she covers such a broad array of topics that are at issue in this case because she was with him for 10 years. She knows about the way he treated her, but she also knows about his life and his business.